just want to pose a question. Pardon for Diddy or no pardon for Diddy? We're going to talk about some interesting things, what he's charged with, the act itself, how it was created and developed, and let's just get right into it. Pardon for Diddy. This is the Dr. Detective series, a PhD true crime podcast. Let's start the show. Welcome to the Dr. Detective, a PhD true crime podcast, where we bring critical assessment based on experience. This episode, we're going to introduce the pardon for Diddy. Question: should he be pardoned or not? Let's see what you all think. So let's talk about it, get right into it. As I said, this is my series, and you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and a couple other platforms in terms of streaming services, right? Also, you can find the newly released website, the Dr.Detective.net. There you can find my background, some of the stories, links at the podcast. Subscribe to the channel there, and also several more things to come. We're going to have t-shirts, cups, mugs, my book series, several books that I have already published, Amazon.com, Kindle, and so forth. But you'll have access to those pretty soon. So again, thanks for watching. Let's get right into this. Diddy, right? We know he was sentenced, and he's facing sentencing, actually. He was convicted of the 2 crimes out of the 5 counts, and sentencing is scheduled for October of this year. So he's still in jail. He's put back in jail, put back in custody until that time. We know they filed several motions, several appeals, trying to get him on house arrest, trying to get him out pending sentencing, and he was denied based upon the level of danger or threat assessment that the judge and the courts mentioned and said. They also went to the president to talk about, would you issue a pardon to Diddy? And President Trump mentioned, at one point in time, I think he liked me, right? I think they were cool at one point in time. I guess at some point in time, it was mentioned that the president thought that Diddy made some kind of unusual comments during the maybe first or second term of election. And I guess he said he's still thinking about it, but maybe not likely. So we'll see what happens. Again, go to our website at the Dr.Detective.net, right? Let's get more into this. So Diddy's convicted. He'll stay in jail until October unless something changes. As of right now, we know he was initially charged with the RICO, or Racketeering Conspiracy Act. 2 different counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. That's going to be a key point that I'm going to ask and pose another question about with these other 2 counts he was found guilty of. Transportation to engage in prostitution. So guilty on count 3, not guilty on the second count of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and guilty on count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, right? So if you look at the act, you look at the actual charges and counts, the more serious charges he's obviously not convicted of. And there's not like a host of documentaries and everything coming out. I believe he just filed like a large lawsuit against a lot of media companies. So again, I don't take a side either way. I just state the facts and research and see what I find. But I found this Mann Act to be pretty interesting. Why is that? This is called the White Slave Traffic Act, or the Mann Act. That's a United States federal law passed in June of 1910. So again, a congressman by the name of James Robert Mann of Illinois, in its original form, made it a felony to engage in interstate or foreign commerce, transport, of any woman or girl for the purpose of prostitution and debauchery or any other immoral purposes, right? This is 1910. The law has been amended and adjusted to include now trafficking with children involved and any and all individuals, if it involves prostitution, human trafficking, and so forth in some other context. So let's talk about this. Congressman Robert Mann of Illinois. I'm going to move my banner here, my little logo here. He likes to jump in there and hide words from us. So take that out briefly. So, Congressman Robert Mann, again, back in 1910, they came up with the act with Congress, and he said it was for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery or any other immoral purpose. So it also makes it illegal under the Mann Act to coerce, entice, or persuade an individual to travel across state lines for such purposes. So let me ask you the question. I got to come back on screen here. Let me ask you all the question while we pause that for a second. Entice, force, persuade. What does it sound like to you? That sounds like force, fraud, coercion. Sounds like that to me. Maybe you think differently. Put yes or no in the comments. Does it sound the same to you? Let me pull this up bigger on the screen again. It also makes it illegal to coerce, entice, or persuade an individual to travel across state lines for those purposes, to engage in prostitution, debauchery, or any other immoral purpose. So does that sound the same or not? Coerce, obviously, coercion, entice, or persuade. So this act also applies to both male and females now. It's not limited to any kind of particular gender. Commercial transportation. So we know he's transporting, he paid for flights and so forth, even though it may have been consensual or was stated it was consensual, right? Any other form of travel, bus, car, what, if you just walk across state lines together, that applies as well, I imagine, because you're traveling, right? So one of the key aspects of the Mann Act in its broad scope and application has been used to prosecute a wide range of activities beyond the original intent, including cases involving consensual sexual relationships in instances where the transportation was not for immoral purposes. So, does that kind of cancel itself out, or um, does that kind of backtrack with what the law is originally stating? So, it's either for immoral purposes, but now it's saying where there's instances where transportation was not for immoral purposes. So you get it both ways. You're guilty, whether it's consensual or not. Question I'm posing. That's all I'm saying. Just a question. You be the judge. So again, I guess we're just amending to make things fit how they need to. I don't know. Again, put yes or no if you agree. So again, back to that question again. Coerce, entice, or persuade for the purpose of prostitution, debauchery, or any other immoral purposes. I guess if people think it's immoral, it's wrong. Does that make it illegal? So are we talking a question of morality being illegal? Wouldn't that apply to other contexts, right? Such as emotions and how you may feel about people or certain type of people or not? More questions. So let's backtrack to where this was originated. 1908, December. On this day, there was a boxing match between Jack Johnson and versus Burns, right? December 26, 1908. Jack Johnson defeats the champion, becomes the first Black world boxing champion, Jack Johnson. And at that time, there were people that were upset. There were people that were outraged. So what happened as a result? Well, there was an attempt to bring a retired boxer out of retirement to defeat Jack Johnson. So, with Jack Johnson's boxing victories, particularly his win over James Jeffries in 1910, it was a major catalyst for some racial animosity and sparked riots across the U.S. By the way, came from AI. This came from Google AI. So we're gonna cite and give credit where credit's due. This is from the AI, right? It was a major catalyst for some animosity and sparked riots across the U.S. Johnson, a black man, defeated Jeffries, a white former champion, billed as the Great White Hope, who came out of retirement to reclaim the title. And we see Jack Johnson here with his female companion, which later became his wife, actually. Again, huge outrage at the time. People were upset, right? So they wanted this guy beat. What does that mean? As a result, the Mann Act was created in 1910 after that defeat. This is again called the White Slave Traffic Act, enacted in 1910, and it prohibited the transportation of any individual across state or international lines for the purpose of prostitution or other immoral purposes. Now, I'm not saying I agree with prostitution. Prostitution, they say it is the oldest living profession. That's what I've heard it labeled. It's been around forever. It's still around. It may take different forms. And then there's the other abusive forms with the human trafficking and forced. No one's agreeing with that or condoning any kind of illegal activity at all. Let's say it twice. I'm not condoning, and I don't agree with anyone else that condones illegal activity. No prostitution, no trafficking. Not agreeing with that. But we're talking about consensual adults. So if you take a flight with a girlfriend or significant other across state lines and things get a little intimate, is that the same thing? Or is it the same thing if someone else gets offended by it? That's the question I'm asking. I got a series of questions during this segment. So, again, the Mann Act of 1910, that's what they established that law based on. And you also had the RICO charge and the other charges for the trafficking, the human trafficking or sex trafficking, as they said, the S trafficking, I should say. Let's continue. So, as a result, Jack Johnson, first African American world heavyweight boxing champion, was convicted of the Mann Act for violating that in 1913. He was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison. 1 year and 1 day for that conviction. Now, he went on the run, is my understanding, and they caught him years later. I believe he fled out of the country, but he was caught and served his time. So he served his time in Leavenworth Penitentiary, but 1 year and 1 day for that conviction. And this law was created to stop him or created to have him arrested for his immoral acts at the time. So they thought. As a result, and a surprise to me, the more you look at the research and the documentation, President Trump pardoned Jack Johnson in 2018. He signed an executive grant of clemency, which is the same thing. We'll talk about that soon. Clemency, which is a pardon, executive grant signed by President Trump in the Oval Office of the White House, May 24th, 2018. This was attempted by several other presidents. This was actually initiated during the Obama presidency, Biden presidency, and so forth. And for some reason, it didn't go forward. But President Trump issued this to Jack Johnson. This was 105 years after his death. Jack Johnson gets his clemency. So the legendary boxer Jack Johnson gets a pardon 105 years after what President Trump states was a baseless conviction. So he received this posthumously, a posthumous presidential pardon after years of bipartisan efforts and lawmakers and family members trying to get his name cleared, and personal appearance from Sylvester Stallone and other celebrities speaking at the Oval Office. And Trump praised Johnson as one of the greatest that ever lived. He was pretty much unbeatable. Trump's words. Trump also noted the fighter's 1913 conviction, which was tied to his relationships with white women, was one that Trump said many view as a racially motivated injustice. Trump said he was treated very rough. And that was one of the reasons for his decision to grant the clemency. So, what does executive grant of clemency actually mean? Johnson was arrested and convicted by an all white jury um, of violating the Mann Act, convicted of the Mann Act. The law banned taking women across lines for immoral purposes. Today, lawmakers say that conviction was racially motivated, and they've introduced a resolution calling on President Obama and other presidents to try to pardon him. They didn't do that. President Trump did, in fact, grant clemency. President Trump did that. So, what would a pardon mean in the consideration of Sean Diddy Combs? Again, no one's condoning any behavior, not condoning any domestic violence, not condoning any threats, anything to that effect. Trust me, I put away a lot of people for those crimes. I've arrested a lot of people, more than I can even remember, for domestic violence, for various levels of assault, violence, misdemeanors, and felonies, multiple arrests, multiple individuals, again, over the years, and I may still continue to do so. During my last term, which is about 10 months, and we'll see what happens then. So, let's talk about this clemency. What would it mean? What would a pardon mean, or clemency? When we talk about a pardon, we're talking about an executive grant of clemency by the president, which is Trump now. A presidential pardon is a form of executive clemency granted by the president of the United States, which forgives a person for a federal crime and releases them from punishment. Now, it also goes on to say it does not erase the guilt associated with the crime, but it does restore certain civil rights that may have been lost due to a conviction, such as the right to vote, the right to hold office, and or the right to serve on a jury. I'll say it again. A pardon is a form of executive clemency granted by the President of the United States, which forgives a person for a federal crime and releases them from punishment. It does not, I'll say it again, it does not erase the guilt associated with the crime, but it does give you back certain civil rights in association. Make sense? So no one's saying it's not that these people are not guilty. They're just saying they won't be punished, or maybe they'll be shown some kind of consideration and clemency for whatever decisions have been made or the outcome. Let's talk about some other notable pardons that President Trump has also granted. Interesting here. I found the January 6th riot on the Capitol. There were 1,500 pardons issued as a result, and that was involved with the large riot, storming of the Capitol, large conspiracy. There were bombs introduced. Several people lost their lives, unfortunately, as a result. But we all know about the January 6th riots, right? 1,500 pardons, various levels of sentencing. Ross Albright, or Silk Road, for those of you that are familiar in the digital and forensics degree and field, or just level of understanding. If you're familiar with what Silk Road is, it was the dark web, the black market, the internet market, or deep web, where you could probably buy just about anything. You could hire people for a hitman, money laundering, fraud, weapons, drugs, just about anything. There's even some trafficking elements or components to that. And there are other sites that have popped up since then. But Ross Ulbricht was granted a pardon, and he was serving a life sentence. I'm going to pause for a moment. So, Silk Road, the gentleman that established Silk Road, where you could get just about anything done, or you could buy just about anything illegally, money laundering, fraud, hacking, murder, or unaliving, trafficking, and so forth. I couldn't even put everything in the box here. He was granted a pardon. Let's move on. The anti-abortion activists, however you feel about that, whichever side you're on. I just thought these are some notable pardons by the same president. 23 pardons issued for various levels of sentencing for the clinic protests, right? And then there's NBA Youngboy, the rapper, who was sentenced to 23 months for gun charges, attempt unaliving, attempt murder, right? Granted a pardon also. The BitMEX founders, hundreds of millions of dollars were stolen, right? and there were 3 pardons for that. Unknown sentencing, but I'm sure it was a number of years involved. If you're talking hundreds of millions, it just depends. Fraud's a little different than every other crime. Terrence Dale Sutton Jr. Crime was second-degree murder. Mr. Sutton Jr. was issued a pardon, and he was serving 66 months. And then there's Trevor Milton, or Nicola, Electric Vehicle Company. Mr. Milton defrauded investors for over $680 million. $680 million. And he was issued a pardon. So you tell me, does Mr. Combs deserve at least a consideration? Maybe. What do you think? Pardon for Diddy or no pardon for Diddy? The act was created by Mr. Mann, the Mann Act, and Mr. Johnson was convicted, given a year and a day as a sentence. So what kind of sentencing should Diddy receive as a result? The 2 victims. The consideration of other victims, that remains to be seen. There's still litigation being pursued, so we can't speak to that. Again, this is all speculation, and I'm just posing several questions to consider. No bail for Diddy? Okay, why not a pardon? Why not maybe just house arrest? Or if nothing else, maybe move him to a different facility, pending the conditions. His legal team cited the conditions of the facility. So for nothing else, if you're going to put people in jail, at least be responsible with the health conditions, or we're still liable for people when we arrest people or take away their freedom. You still have to treat people accordingly, right? People are entitled to medical treatment, proper care, nourishment, and everything else. So again, we're not supposed to be savage, right? Like some people are. We're not supposed to be the same. We're supposed to be better. So if we see better, we got to do better, right? Regardless of how you feel about this man, he's been convicted. Sentencing is pending. Whether he gets a pardon or not, that remains to be seen. But we can't be inhuman. We can't be inhumane about the treatment of someone. So you can't have it both ways, right? So however you feel is your discretionary right to feel so. But let's do things at least above board. Let's do it the correct way. Just do it the right way. You can get anyone for any crime. Just do it the right way. And that's what I stand by. Call me a Boy Scout. I'll be that. I'll take that. But I've done it the right way. I can hold my head up and go anywhere in the world because I've not done anybody incorrectly. I've not signed any bad charges or made bad arrests or anything. I'm not saying this was the case here. I'm just posing the question. So is there a difference between being a sexual deviant and or a criminal? And this is not a comparison between the two. Just the slide I selected. This is not a comparison between the two. But I'm asking you, is there a difference between being a deviant or predator, whatever you want to label a person, and or criminal, or is that one and the same? So again, I pose that question: pardon for Diddy or not? You see, there's a question mark there. That's why. You be the judge. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned and think about that. Think about the Mann Act. Think about, as what I mentioned with Jack Johnson, and some of the context of what the law reads, how the law reads, and how the law states. How it states. It's how it was created, right? So President Trump himself said it was motivated by hostility and some injustices. You be the judge of that. 105 years later, this man gets clemency posthumously. So again, you be the judge, and just have those considerations for, being consistent. Consistency always wins. It is key. I believe it is paramount to doing right by people. So we'll see. Maybe no bail, but maybe at least a pardon of consideration. Again, thanks for watching the series. Put your comments in the, put your comments and thoughts in the chat. Appreciate it. Another story coming this week. So again, this is the pardon for Diddy question. Should it happen or should it not happen? Brought to you by the Dr.Detective, a PhD true crime podcast. Again, find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and now the Dr.Detective.net. Thanks for watching. As always, spread love, share some wisdom. Let's go.